Hello there, welcome back to Disney Princess Storytime, and today we've got a rare little gem in the form of Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue.
Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue. Tinkerbell and the fairies of Pixie Hollow soared through the sky. They were on their way to bring summer to the mainland. Summer was the fairies' busiest season. They would be staying on the mainland for a few months to get all their work done. Tinkerbell's friend Terence flew up next to her on a white dove. "Hey Tink, you ready for the first summer in the mainland?" "Absolutely! It's so beautiful out there. I can't believe we get to stay for a whole season." Tinkerbell had never been so excited. "Well, what are you waiting for? Race you down." Tink and Terence landed in the clearing. "Come on, Tink, let's go inside." Tinkerbell looked around. "Inside?" "Tink, fairy camp isn't out here in the open. We need to stay hidden from the humans." Terence walked over to an old oak tree and pulled back a cluster of leaves. There, beneath the tree, was a camp bustling with fairies. One fairy was teaching crickets to sing, another painted stripes on a group of bumblebees, while a third painted pretty designs on butterflies' wings. Everyone looked very busy. Tinkerbell could not wait to start tinkering. Terence, a dust talent, had to go deliver pixie dust to all the fairies in the camp. "Tink, don't worry, you'll find something to fix." "I hope so. In the meantime, I need to go find some lost things." Tinkerbell was on her way out when Vidya, a fast-flying fairy, flew right into her path. "You're not going near the human houses, are you?" Tink's eyes grew wide with excitement. "There's a human house?" Suddenly a loud crack echoed through the camp. All fairies were startled. Thorns splattered paint on the butterfly's wings before it flew off. Other fairies hid under leaves or between flowers. But Tinkerbell wanted to know where the noise had come from. She flew high above the tree and saw a car on the road. Fascinated, she chased after it. "Tinkerbell!" Vidya took after her. Tinkerbell followed the car until it stopped at a house in the country. A little girl named Lizzie got out with her father, Dr. Griffith, and their cat, Mr. Twitches. "Thank goodness we're here, father. It's just like I remember it." "Well, of course, my darling." Tinkerbell watched from a nearby tree as the family went into the house. Then she flew up to the car for a closer look. "Vidya, this is amazing. It's a carriage that moves by itself. There's no horse." Tinkerbell zipped into the engine. Vidya hovered nervously outside. "I don't care, Tinkerbell. You shouldn't be this close to a human house." But Tink wasn't listening. She had found an interesting lever, and she had to pull it. "Let me know if this does anything." Suddenly, Vidya was sprayed with a stream of water. She was still in shock when Tinkerbell flew out of the engine. "Vidya, you're all wet." Vidya glared at Tink. "You don't say." Just then, Liz and her father returned to unload the car. Tink and Vidya froze. While they watched the humans, a butterfly fluttered around them. It was the one Fawn had splattered with paint when the car had driven past the fairy camp. Dr. Griffith stopped unloading the luggage to take a look. "The wings have two entirely different patterns." "Why, that's nearly impossible." "Well, I guess it's just the way the fairies decide to paint it." "Liz, fairies don't paint butterfly wings because, as you know, fairies are not real." Dr. Griffiths grabbed his journal and began sketching the butterfly. Liz didn't believe her father. She knew fairies were real. She had even made a house to catch one in. She was going to take it into the meadow, and she wanted her father to go with her. But Dr. Griffiths was too busy. "Not now, Lizzie. I have to update my field journal. My interview at the museum is tomorrow night." Dr. Griffiths followed the butterfly. Liz skipped off in the other direction. When the coast was clear, Tinkerbell and Vidya came out under the car. Vidya couldn't fly because her wings were still wet. Tink offered to walk back to fairy camp with her. As they crossed the meadow, Tink spotted a trail of buttons. "Wow! These will be perfect for the new wagon prototype I've been working on." She began to stack them in her arms. She wanted to help Vidya too. "Tinkerbell, I'm not carrying this human junk back to camp." Suddenly, Vidya stopped in her tracks. The buttons led right to the fairy house. Tinkerbell wanted to explore, but Vidya wanted to leave right away. "Let's go!" Tinkerbell was not supposed to go near human houses. "Oh, come on, Vidya, it's perfectly safe." Tink hopped over the buttons leading to the door. Then she went inside. The fairy house was filled with human objects. Tink began to fiddle with an old pocket watch that hung on the wall. "Oh, really?" Vidya decided it was time to teach Tinkerbell a lesson. With the wave of her arm, Vidya whipped a gust of wind. The door to the fairy house slammed shut while Tinkerbell was still inside. "Huh! Not so safe now, is it?" Vidya hoped she had scared Tink enough to make her come out and head back to the fairy camp. Suddenly, Vidya heard a twig snap. Someone was coming. She tugged on the door to let Tink out, but it wouldn't budge. "Tink, someone's coming!" The door's stuck! Tinkerbell thought Vidya was still trying to trick her. Oh, come on, Vidya. You can do better than that. Vidya jumped behind some plants just as Liz walked up to the fairy house. Inside, Tinkerbell noticed that Vidya had gotten very quiet. Vidya? Vidya? She tried to open the door and discovered that it really was stuck. Suddenly, Tink looked up and saw a giant eye staring at her through the window. Liz couldn't believe what she was seeing. A fairy! It's a real fairy! Liz picked up the fairy house and took off down the path. Vidya watched in horror from the spot behind the plants. Oh no! What have I done? Liz ran into her father's office with her fairy house. You're never going to believe what I've found. But Dr. Griffiths was studying the butterfly he had captured. He was going to take it to the museum. Liz ran upstairs to her room, followed by Mr. Twitches. She slowly took the lid off the fairy house. Tinkerbell darted out. Mr. Twitch lunged for her. Mr. Twitches, no! Bad cat! Liz grabbed Tinkerbell and put her in a birdcage, where the cat couldn't reach her. Then she picked up the cat and headed for the door. Don't worry, little fairy. Mr. Twitches won't bother you as long as you're in there. Vidya knew she had to rescue Tink, but she needed help. She rushed back to fairy camp. Tinkerbell's been captured by humans. Vidya told them everything. The fairies made a plan to rescue Tinkerbell right away. But outside, it had started raining hard. Fawn looked at the falling drops. We can't fly in this rain. Plank and Bobble, two other Tinker fairies, had an idea. We're going to build a boat. At the Griffiths' house, Liz opened the birdcage. Tinkerbell cautiously stepped out. Then she darted to the window. I'm not going to hurt you. I just want to be your friend. Liz showed Tink her collection of fairy notes and drawings. Tink realized that the little girl loved fairies. She tried to tell Liz what fairies were really like, but all Liz could hear was a jingling sound, like the ringing of a bell. So that's how fairies speak. So what do you think of my fairies? Oh, and my fairy house. Tink flew over to the fairy house and began to fix the jammed door. Well, you're quite the little tinker, aren't you? Tinkerbell pointed to herself and then rang the little house bell. Liz realized that the fairy was trying to tell her something. Tinkerbell? Oh, what a lovely name! Just then, Dr. Griffiths came upstairs. When he heard the sound of Liz's voice, he opened a bedroom door. Tinkerbell quickly hid. Liz, who are you talking to? Liz held up one of her fairy drawings. My fairy! Dr. Griffiths frowned. He didn't want Liz to waste her time dreaming about fairies. He handed her a small book. Here is a blank field journal. I'm sure you'll be able to fill it with your own scientific research. Then he went back to the hallway to fix the leak in the ceiling. Tinkerbell came out of her hiding place and landed on the windowsill. She wanted to go back to her friends. Lizzie looked disappointed. Oh, I really wish you'd stay. She opened the window, but when Tink saw how hard it was raining, she looked sad. Can't you fly in the rain? Tinkerbell shook her head. You can stay here with me until the rain stops. Tinkerbell agreed. They got to work on Lizzie's new journal. Meanwhile, Tinkerbell's friends had finished building their boat, set down the flooded path through the meadow. Fawn climbed to the top of the mast to get a better look of what lay ahead. Suddenly she gasped. Hey guys, we're heading right for a waterfall! Silvermist, a water-talented fairy, had an idea. She leaned over the edge of the boat and put her fingers in the water. She concentrated hard, and soon the water level rose so that the drop over the falls wasn't as steep. The boat sailed over the roaring rapids and crashed into the grass on the shore. Vidya looked around. None of her fairies were hurt, but the boat was destroyed. Looks like we're going to be walking from here. Tinkerbell and Lizzie had finished working on Lizzie's journal. Tinkerbell flew out the window to go back to the fairy camp, but she stopped when she heard Lizzie's voice. Father, look! Lizzie was trying to show her father her fairy journal. I made it especially for you, Father. It's like your field journal. It's filled with lots of facts. I don't have time. I have to find some way to deal with all these links. Tink looked in the direction of the fairy camp, where her friends were waiting. Then she looked back at the house. She knew what she had to do. Lizzie sat on her bed, flipping through the fairy journal. There were tears in her eyes. Suddenly, a small shadow appeared over the journal. Tinkerbell, you came back! Lizzie beamed when the fairy landed in her hand. Oh, Tinkerbell, Father has no time for the field journal. Tinkerbell smiled. She wiped away Lizzie's tears. I think I can fix that. Meanwhile, Vidya got stuck in the mud while trying to help the other fairies cross a road. The fairies tried to pull her out, but it was no use. Suddenly, the fairies were hit with a flash of light. A car is coming! Fawn began to panic. Come on, hurry! But Iridessa, a light-talented fairy, had an idea. She stuck her head into the beam of light and bent it back towards the driver. He thought another vehicle was heading straight for him and slammed on the brakes. The car skidded to a stop just inches from where Vidya was stuck. The car door opened and a big shoe stepped out. The driver was confused. Hello? Is somebody out there? Fawn noticed that the driver's shoelace was untied. Grab this! Hurry! Vidya looked at her in disbelief. Are you kidding me? But Fawn knew her plan would work. Trust me, and hold on tight. All the fairies grabbed the driver's shoelace. As he turned to get back in his car, they were pulled out of the mud. Back at Liz's house, Tinkerbell set to work on fixing the leaks in Dr. Griffith's office. She hoped that would give Dr. Griffiths more time to spend with Lizzie. Tinkerbell flew into the dark, misty attic, where she found 2 leaks in the roof. She searched through old crates and boxes until she found the parts she needed. Then she got to work. Soon she had set up a system that sent the water coming into the house back out again. She had stopped the leaks. On her way back to Liz's room, Tinkerbell flew past Dr. Griffith's office. There, she spotted the butterfly Lizzie and her father had seen in the garden. It was trapped in a jar on Dr. Griffith's desk. Tinkerbell wanted to help it. A little while later, Dr. Griffiths noticed that the leak had stopped. Then he saw the jar on his desk was empty. He showed Lizzie the empty jar. The butterfly is gone. Did you release it? Lizzie was surprised at her father. No. Well, I didn't do it, and since there's no one else in the house, there's only one logical explanation. It must have been you. I didn't do it, father. Dr. Griffiths didn't believe his daughter. I'm very disappointed in you. He sent Lizzie to her room. Outside, Tinkerbell's friends were almost to the house. Suddenly, Vidya stopped everyone. Tinkerbell getting trapped is all my fault. I slammed that door on Tinkerbell to teach her a lesson, and now I've put her in all this danger. I'm so sorry. Rosetta looked at Vidya. Oh, honey, this is not your fault. We all know that Tink can get into plenty of trouble all by herself. Vidya was shocked. I don't know what to say. Rosetta held out her hand. The other fairies put their hands over hers. How about faith? Trust. Vidya clapped her hand with the others. And pixie dust. Tinkerbell followed Liz back to her room. I'm so sorry, Lizzie. Lizzie looked at Tink. I'm glad to see you're here. I wish I were a fairy. Tinkerbell smiled. She had an idea. She motioned for Liz to spread her arms wide and close her eyes. Then Tink flew above Liz's head and sprinkled her with pixie dust. Suddenly, Liz's pigtails began to float. Next, her whole body lifted up off the floor. Liz grabbed onto the bedpost. She didn't know what was happening. Tinkerbell smiled. She showed Liz how to move her arms and legs. After a short lesson, Liz was flying. Look at me! Whee! I'm a fairy! Downstairs, the fairy rescue team had finally arrived. Vidya and the rest of Tinkerbell's friends cautiously entered the Griffiths' kitchen. Okay, Tinkerbell is upstairs. The little girl has her in a cage. There is also a large human in the house who doesn't like creatures with wings. He pins them up in display cases. Horn looked worried. Great! Anything else? Oh yes, the cat. Suddenly Mr. Twitches appeared in the kitchen doorway. He pounced just as the fairies took off. They climbed onto a nearby shelf, spilling pixie dust on a set of dishes. The cups, plates, and saucers all began to hover in the air. Vidya had an idea. She jumped from plate to plate, using the dishes as a bridge. The other fairies followed, but so did Mr. Twitches. Rosetta noticed that Vidya had almost crossed the kitchen. You get to Tink, and we'll take care of the cat. Got it! Vidya made her way to the staircase and began to climb it one step at a time. While the fairies were battling Mr. Twitches, Dr. Griffiths went to Liz's room. He heard lots of bumps and crashes. What's going on here? Nothing. Dr. Griffiths looked around. Look at this room. It looks like a cyclone hit it. How do you get footprints on the ceiling? Liz looked nervously at her father. I was flying. My fairy showed me. Oh, for goodness sake, you've got to stop this nonsense. Tinkerbell was furious. She flew out of her hiding place, right into Dr. Griffiths' face. Dr. Griffiths stumbled backwards in shock. It's extraordinary. This is going to be the discovery of a century. Vidya entered the room just as Dr. Griffiths grabbed a jar and lowered it towards Tinkerbell. Tink, watch out! Vidya zoomed over and knocked Tink out of the way. Tinkerbell was safe, but the jar came down over Vidya instead. She was trapped. Dr. Griffiths ran out the room with the jar in hand. I must get this to the museum right away. Father, no! Lizzie tried to stop him, but he wouldn't listen. He hopped into his car and drove off. Suddenly, Tink and Lizzie heard Mr. Twitches meowing. He walked into the room with Tinkerbell's friends on his back. Rosetta had used a catnip to tame him. Tinkerbell was glad to see her friends. Liz's father trapped Vidya in a jar while she was saving me. We have to hurry to rescue her. Fawn told Tink that it was still raining. How are we going to get there? Tinkerbell thought for a moment. Maybe we can't fly, but I think I know someone who can. A few minutes later, Lizzie stood in the middle of the kitchen, wearing a rain slicker and a hat. Tink turned to her friends. All right, fairies, we need all the pixie dust we can get. This girl's got a long journey ahead of her. The fairies showered Lizzie with pixie dust from head to foot. When they were done, Lizzie began to lift up off the floor. Tinkerbell settled into the collar of Lizzie's coat. All aboard! The other fairies flew into Lizzie's pockets. Then Lizzie flew through the kitchen door and up, up into the sky. I'm flying! The sky grew dark and the rain stopped as Lizzie soared through the clouds. Soon the group spotted the lights of London twinkling below. As Lizzie descended towards the city, she spotted her father's car. There he is, Tinkerbell! I can't keep up. He's going too fast. Tinkerbell took off towards the car and was soon flying right next to it. Inside, she could see Vidya in the jar. Vidya was surprised to see Tinkerbell. Tinkerbell! Tinkerbell nodded, then she dove beneath the car. Tinkerbell, no! Flying upside down, Tinkerbell studied the engine. It was full of dangerous whirling parts. She tried her best to stay away from them as she tugged on pipes and wires. The engine began to spark and sputter, and soon the car came to a stop. Dr. Griffiths banged on the steering wheel. No, 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 no! He grabbed the jar with Vidya inside and began to run the rest of the way to the museum. Lizzie and Tinkerbell were right on his heels. Father! Dr. Griffiths stopped. He turned around slowly to see Liz flying towards him. Lizzie! You're flying! Lizzie smiled. Yes, I am. My friends show me how. Tinkerbell flew up next to Lizzie, and the other fairies flew out of her pockets. Dr. Griffiths was in shock. I don't understand. You don't have to understand. You just have to believe. I do believe. I do believe. Dr. Griffiths opened his arms, and Lizzie rushed into them. Oh, Lizzie, I'm so sorry. I'll never doubt you again. Dr. Griffiths let go of Lizzie. He handed her the jar. Lizzie smiled as she unscrewed the lid and watched Vidya fly out. Vidya! Tinkerbell wrapped her in a hug. The other fairies surrounded them, glowing bright with joy. Then the fairies flew over to Lizzie and Dr. Griffiths and sprinkled them both with pixie dust. They rose slowly into the air. Lizzie watched her father begin to fly. You're doing it, father. Why, I think I'm getting the hang of this. Yes! Why, I'm flying! Together they rose over the city streets and flew home. The next day, the fairies joined Lizzie and Dr. Griffiths for a tea party in the meadow. Tinkerbell and Vidya sipped tea together. The other fairies flew in with a crown of flowers for Lizzie. Isn't this pleasant, father? Dr. Griffiths beamed as a firefly named Blaze dropped 3 lumps of sugar into his teacup. I can't imagine anything better. When they had finished their tea and snacks, everyone sat back and listened as Dr. Griffiths read from Lizzie's fairy journal. Terence flew up next to Tinkerbell. Well, Tink, you found something to fix after all. Tinkerbell looked at Lizzie and her father snuggled close together and smiled. Yeah, I guess I did. The end.
So that was Tinkerbell and the Great Fairy Rescue. If you like this book, be sure to check out the Disney film. It's one of Disney's lesser known films, but still a very good one to watch regardless. Until then, we'll see you again on Storytime. Goodbye. Fairy.
仙女
Human.
人
Cat.
猫
Journal.
刊物